You think you know the Mafia from the movies? Forget it. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a story the mob bosses tried to bury along with their victim's body. This is the tale of the last dinosaur of the old school, Joe Masseria, the man who held New York in an iron fist. But his death wasn't just a murder, it was a ritual. And in the dead boss's hand, the killers left a secret message. Watch until the end, and you will discover what the ace of spades clutched in Joe's fingers really meant, and how his death launched the most powerful criminal empire in U.S. history. Imagine New York in the 1920s, a city of contrasts, where skyscrapers pierce the clouds, while in their shadows, on the grimy streets, a different life boils. A life where the one with the heavier gun and a thicker wad of cash is king. It was here, in this melting pot of ambition and vice, that the star of our protagonist rose. Although protagonist isn't the right word. His name was Giuseppe Joe the Boss Masseria. He wasn't just a gangster, he was the embodiment of the old Sicilian Mafia, crude, greedy, and immeasurably cruel. Masseria didn't make plans for decades ahead. He lived in the here and now. His philosophy was simple. Everything I can reach is mine, and anyone who disagrees gets a bullet. He and his gang, made up of equally hungry and ruthless immigrants, started small, shaking down shopkeepers, robberies, extortion. But soon, a gold mine fell upon America. Prohibition. Alcohol was outlawed, which meant its price skyrocketed. For guys like Joe, this was a sign from above. He seized control of the entire illegal liquor business. His trucks funneled a river of bootleg whiskey and beer into the city, filling speakeasies and Masseria's own pockets. He became a king. He was respected and feared. People came to him to settle disputes, and his word was law. To refuse him was to sign your own death warrant. He was the boss of all bosses. But every empire has its sunset, and the clouds were already gathering over Joe's head. Masseria's problem was his greed. He taxed everyone he could. He demanded a cut of every deal, every dollar earned on his territory. He didn't understand that the world was changing. A new generation of gangsters was rising around him. Young, audacious, and most importantly, smart. They saw that Joe's methods were outdated. They wanted to do business in a new way, build an enterprise, negotiate, create a system. And Masseria was like an old king getting in the way of progress. Among these young wolves were future legends of the criminal underworld. Charles, Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese, Frank Costello. They all worked for Masseria. They brought him money, carried out his dirty work, and gritted their teeth at his tyranny. Luciano was the most ambitious. He saw himself at the top. He understood that pointless wars and bloody feuds were bad for business. He was waiting for his moment. And that moment arrived when a new player came to New York. His name was Salvatore Maranzano. He was an emissary of the Sicilian Mafia, a man of old-world traditions, but with a cold, calculating mind. He also wanted a piece of the New York pie, and he began to rally everyone who was dissatisfied with Masseria's rule. The city held its breath. Two titans, two old Sicilian lions, could not coexist in the same pride. A war began. A war that would be called the Castellammarese War. The city streets turned into a battlefield. Every day, the newspapers were filled with headlines about new murders. Gangsters were shot in their cars, in bars, on the doorsteps of their own homes. It was a meat grinder. Masseria and Maranzano were wiping out each other's men by the dozen. Blood flowed in the streets, and business came to a halt. For young gangsters like Luciano, this was a disaster. They were losing money and men in a war between two stubborn old men who couldn't share power. Luciano realized, to stop the war, one of the kings had to be removed. But which one?
Maranzano was smarter and more organized, and Masseria, he was his boss. To betray him meant breaking the sacred law of the Mafia, omerta. But Luciano had long been living by his own laws. His main law was the strongest and the smartest survive. He made his choice. He decided to bet on Maranzano. Luciano secretly met with Maranzano and offered a deal written in blood. "I'll take care of Masseria," he said, "and you'll end the war and become the new boss." Maranzano agreed. For him, it was the perfect scenario, a victory in the war, won by someone else's hands. Luciano returned to his boss, pretending nothing had happened. He continued to smile to his face, to shake his hand, knowing he had already signed his death sentence. It was the height of cynicism and cold calculation.
The day came, April 15th, 1931, a day that forever changed the history of the American Mafia. Luciano invited Masseria to lunch at his favorite restaurant, Nuova Villa Tamaro on Coney Island. The atmosphere was peaceful and relaxed. They ate, drank wine, and reminisced about old times. Masseria was at ease. He trusted Luciano, his best lieutenant. After lunch, they decided to play a game of cards. In the middle of the game, Luciano excused himself, saying he needed to use the restroom. This was the signal. As soon as the door closed behind him, 4 men burst into the restaurant. Their faces were hidden, and they clutched pistols in their hands. Legend says they were the future pillars of crime: Bugsy Siegel, Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and Joe Adonis. They opened a hail of gunfire. Joe Masseria didn't even have time to understand what was happening. Bullets tore through his body, turning his expensive suit into a bloody sieve. He collapsed to the floor, clutching a playing card in his hand, the ace of spades. The last boss of the old school was dead. His era ended here, on the dirty floor of a restaurant, to the sound of gunshots and shattering dishes. Luciano walked out of the restroom when it was all over. He coolly looked at the body of his former boss and called the police. So what did that card mean, the ace of spades found in Masseria's hand? For decades, historians and cops puzzled over it. One theory is that it was a message. In some card games, the ace of spades is the death card. The killers were essentially saying, "You just lost your final hand." But there's another, deeper interpretation. It was a symbol of betrayal. Luciano didn't just kill his boss, he staged a revolution. He destroyed the old world of Sicilian traditions, where power was inherited and mustachioed dons ran the show. He showed everyone that from now on, the Mafia would be ruled not by tradition, but by efficiency, not by age, but by ambition. He proved that even the most powerful boss is just a man who can be removed if he gets in the way of business.
Masseria's death ended the Castellammarese War. Maranzano, as agreed, became the new boss of all bosses. But his triumph was short-lived. Luciano, having removed one king, had no intention of bowing to another. Just a few months later, he would eliminate Maranzano in the same cold, calculating manner. But that is another story entirely. The main lesson of this criminal saga is that in a world ruled by power and money, you can trust no one. Your most loyal friend today can be your executioner tomorrow. Masseria was a tyrant, but he lived by his own code, however brutal. He died because he failed to see the cold gleam of betrayal in his protégé's eyes. He underestimated the hunger of the young wolves snapping at his heels. Luciano, on the other hand, built a new empire on the blood of his boss. He created the Commission, a board of directors for the Mafia that ran crime across the country like a unified corporation. He replaced chaos with a system and senseless slaughter with business negotiations. He became the architect of the modern American Mafia. And the foundation for this new world was the corpse of Joe Masseria, lying on a restaurant floor with an ace of spades in his hand. This story isn't just about gangsters. It's a parable about power, ambition, and the inevitable changing of the guard. The old always gives way to the new. Even the strongest oak tree eventually falls to make way for the young forest. Masseria was that oak. He thought his power was eternal, but he forgot the man rule of the streets. If you don't evolve, you die. And his death became a loud and bloody reminder of that for everyone who decided to play the game for high stakes. The story of Joe Masseria is a hymn to ambition and cold calculation. It teaches us that at the top, there are no friends, only interests. If this atmosphere captivated you and you want to find out how Lucky Luciano pulled off the most audacious power play in Mafia history by betraying his new boss too, let's get this video to 2,000 likes. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and write in the comments whose story you'd like to hear next. Stay sharp, and remember, on the streets, the strongest survive.